Oh, good. All right, whatever. I don't care. All right, we did it. We did it. I don't understand the ending at all, but we did it. All right. Okay, so first things first. The bottom center of the screen says that we've beaten 113 games this year, and 435 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers are now incorrect. We've now beaten 114 games in 2023, and 436 since we started doing this in 2020. Okay, so I have some thoughts. I will say first that I did quite enjoy this game. There are several things about it that are pretty excellent. The combat is great. It's very snappy, it's very precise, it's weighty, it feels good to switch weapons and shoot different kinds of ammo and use different kinds of abilities. All that stuff is pretty on point. The story doesn't fully make sense to me, but it's cool, and it's good window dressing, a good vehicle for the combat. The enemies are cool, like wood and tree element enemies have been done before, but the enemy design in this game is cool. And it's not just trees, but the enemy design in general is pretty great. There's this other scene where there's this other part of the game where they kind of look like the angels from Diablo, and those are cool too. So the enemy design, the environments, the graphics in general are great. This game looks great. I don't consider it a Souls-like, really, because of how much gunplay is in it, but if there was a Souls-like that looked as good as this game, I would be interested in that. I don't think there is. The closest might be something like Lies of P, just because it's newer, but I don't think it looks quite as good as this. So the graphics are great. And the gameplay loop, the way the game is structured, where there are different levels that you can go to, and then you complete that level, and then you can move on, or you can go back to them. I think I like that clear partition structure. That's always something that I appreciate in videos. So in video games, so I liked that. So all in all, I had a great time playing it. All in all. Downsides exist. I think that here's my number one problem. Here's my number one problem with this game. The one thing that if it was better, this game would be instantly a top 50 game. But it's not. And that's the loot grind. This game is clearly, this is a co-op shooter. I didn't play it co-op, but it's designed to be played with friends, a la Borderlands, Diablo, loot shooter, other kinds of games. It is a loot shooter. Where's the fucking loot? There's hardly any loot in this game. The only loot that you really get is there are rings that you find occasionally, and then you get craftable materials that get looted, and you can craft certain things. But even that is limited. This game needs a real loot grind. It's not. I'm not saying every game needs a loot, but this game is clearly designed to be a loot shooter. It actually reminds me a lot, the way the combat works and stuff, of the Division and the Division 2, which are among my very favorite video games of all time. But the key reason, the keystone of that, is the incredible loot grind that makes the gameplay loop addictive. And this game is designed like that. It just doesn't have any loot. You get chests and you open them and it's like, okay, you got 3 craftable resources. Who's excited about that? These bosses should be dropping guns. They should be dropping gear. I had my handgun. You get 2 guns. You have a long gun and a handgun. Both of the ones that I got were what I got at the beginning of the game when I picked my class. I had helmets. I had a helmet, I had headgear, I had chest gear, I had boots, and something else. And they were all what I got at the beginning of the game when I chose my class. That's just a straight up missed opportunity. Why would you not put a little bit of focus on that if you're even advertising as a loot shooter? Like, I feel like maybe the answer is, like, you get better loot when you get into, like, the in-game stuff and the adventure mode when you replay stuff. But that pisses me off. That should be a part of the core game, if it's a part of anything. So it's either not here at all, or they're holding on to it for New Game Plus, which, fuck that decision. I hate that. I think that's objectively bad. You want to get somebody hooked on your game, you need to do it during the very first part of the during the actual first campaign. I just can't believe they would build a game that's structured like this, where you have loot, there's gear, you get chests, you open them, you kill bosses, they drop things, and then there's just no loot? Or it's extremely sparse. I got 3 guns the entire game. 2 of them were the ones that were handed to me when I picked my class. I got 1 other game, and I had to craft that shit. That didn't drop. Weapons don't drop. Gear doesn't drop. Why not throw some helmets in there, man? It doesn't have to be rocket science. Gives me extra couple armor. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just give me something to some more additional incentive to kill enemies. So that's my number one gripe with a bullet. I mean, that's my number one. That would change this for me from a good but not great game into an incredible game, and it's just completely neglected. So that's complaint number 1, and the biggest complaint. Number 2, I think this game struggles with balancing its difficulty. It's usually, I played it on the normal difficulty, which in this game is pretty easy for the most part. And so I didn't have that hard of a time with most of the game, but this game inflates its difficulty by throwing 40 enemies at you sometimes at a time. And so, of course, it's much harder, but that's not real difficulty. You know, it's one of the main reasons I don't play games on hard, is because usually what games do to make their games harder is they just give the enemies more health and they deal more damage and you have more enemies to fight. That's not real difficulty, you know? That's not what makes the best Dark Souls bosses hard. Not that they just have a lot of health. You know, I think of someone like Malekith from Elden Ring. That boss does not have a ton of health. But he's got these nuances like lifesteal and bleed, and just his move set is incredibly intricate and varied. That's what makes that boss hard. The bosses in this game are either, with the exception of the final boss, I thought the final boss was actually pretty good. But outside of that, they're either easy or they're hard for the wrong reasons. Most of them are just kind of easy. And that's, you know, I'm not going to hold that against the game because I played it on an easier difficulty, on like whatever normal. So anyway, the game is the game is easy, and the only times it's not easy is when it's difficult for the wrong reasons. You know, so like I said, I love a difficult game. Some of my favorite games are some of the hardest games I've ever played, but it's got to be difficult for the right reasons. If you're just going to throw 50 enemies at me that gank you, that's not fun, you know? And this game... So, and that kind of takes me back to the last thing I wanted to say. The bosses in this game, most of them weren't that hard. The final boss I thought was very difficult and very fun, and that was the best part of the game. But most of the bosses either weren't that hard, or they were hard because they had like minions, or the environment was weird or something. The first Remnant game, I hated the boss fights. Even though I liked the combat and everything just like this game, it was very similar in that regard, but I hated the boss fights because they were almost all gank fights. And I'm not talking Ornstein and Smo, 2 bosses fighting at the same time. I'm talking about the main boss, and then 30 minions in the boss arena that you have to fight too. It's like, it's an inflated difficulty. It's bullshit difficulty. It's like, if you want to make a hard boss, take the time to make the boss intricate enough to actually be difficult. Don't just throw a bunch of minions in there and be like, oh, cool, now it's a tough boss. Don't do that. And this game made a vast improvement in that regard. That only happened, I think, twice in the boss fights where there were like a bunch of minions, and they were much more reasonable. So they made an improvement there. However, it does expose a flaw in this game when they took those out, and that's that this game developer doesn't really know how to make a really truly difficult boss fight most of the time. The only reason I put an asterisk on that is because I thought the final boss was pretty creative and pretty well done and pretty difficult. But they had like all hands on deck for that thing. I mean, that's the final boss. You don't want to skimp on that. Those creative juices just weren't there for any of the other boss fights. So while I found the boss fights to be fun, I love a good boss fight, and there were some decent ones in here. They weren't that tough, and they would have been more fun if they had really challenged me. The only real satisfaction I got beating a boss in this game was the final one, and a puzzle boss in the middle that I won't spoil, but I thought it was really fun. And it wasn't a real, it was a puzzle boss for sure, So, I'll have to actually do some thinking as to whether I liked that one or the final boss more, but they're probably the final boss. All right, so anyway, when I think about where I'm going to rank this game, right now I have Chronos at the above Remnant, because Chronos is a real Souls-like, and I enjoyed that more than the first Remnant. I liked the first Remnant, but I really loved Chronos. I think probably I liked this better than Remnant 1, mostly because of the boss fights, because outside of that, it's largely the same game. I also liked the way that it was divided up better. The way that the levels are partitioned out, I thought was better than the first game. I thought that was an improvement. I thought the graphics were better. The enemy design, I think, was better. But I don't know if I like it as much as Chronos. I'll have to think about it. It might be close. But all in all, it was a fun game. I'm glad I finally got to play it. And we can cross the Remnant franchise off the list until they come up with another game. All right. So, last order of business, Remnant 2. It's been fun. I'm glad we finally got to play and complete you, but we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye, love you. Bye. Well, like you.